Thank you, Chairman Rockefeller. Mr. Wheeler, I want to thank you for your interest to serve as the next chairman of the Federal Communications Commission and to bring your considerable experience to the agency. We're in the midst of a technological revolution that holds great promise to improve the lives of all Americans. Advancements seem to be moving faster than ever before, and they're finding their ways into the hands of consumers more quickly and in larger numbers every day. Today, grandparents who live thousands of miles away can see their grandkids grow up due to the Internet and video applications. Small business owners in places like South Dakota use smart devices to run their companies and have access to technology that previously only the world's largest corporations could use. And doctors are able to diagnose and help folks in rural America without patients traveling hundreds of miles to see a specialist. When we met last week, we talked a little bit about South Dakota, and I again want to extend an open invitation to you to visit. There's no substitute for seeing firsthand the challenges of rural communications delivery and the value that new technology holds for Americans living in rural states. You can also replace the old sign from Wall Drug that you happened to come by a few years ago. As my colleagues may be aware, you've written, and I quote, that the Communications Act and its enforcer, the FCC, are analog legacies in a digital world, end quote. And then you went on to say, and I quote again, regulation designed around 20th century technology and monopoly market structure isn't a perfect tool for dealing with distributed digital networks and multiple service providers, end quote. I think that frames our big picture discussion perfectly. And coming from someone now aspiring to lead that same legacy agency using that same outdated law, it begs several questions. The first question is, will you work with Congress and seek to amend the law where it may be inadequate or outdated? The two previous FCC chairmen both chose to intervene in the broadband market based on questionable legal theories rather than any clear statutory authority or congressional intent. The first attempt was struck down in court, and the second may yet meet the same fate. If the Commission loses again, I hope you will take a deep breath and come to Congress for legal clarity or revision instead of wasting even more public resources on regulatory adventuring. I certainly hope that you would also refrain from applying the monopoly-era Title II common carriage regime to our modern broadband economy. Second, will you conduct agency business transparently? You've been criticized for suggesting that the FCC use merger conditions to create de facto regulation for an entire industry, or at a minimum underscoring its ability to do so. I hope that you understand the anxiety among lawmakers when a potential agency chairman who is tasked with executing the law discusses using a backdoor to imposing a new regulatory regime and skirting the regulatory authority issue. Congress never intended for the FCC's transaction review authority to be used as a backdoor policymaking tool that lacks both transparency and judicial review. We already have too many federal agencies carrying out their own agendas and overstepping their congressional mandates. We don't need the FCC to be another one. Third, will you be a visionary? As an industry leader and having served on the FCC's Technological Advisory Council, you've seen firsthand the power and potential of the Internet. There's no debate whether our current telecommunications laws, whether they were written in 1996, 1992, or 1934, anticipated a converged world in which American consumers can choose from multiple wireline and wireless communication substitutes. None of them did. In fact, all of our laws deserve to be reviewed and brought into the digital all-IP era, reflecting not just today's reality, but also allowing for tomorrow's advances. Your term at the FCC has the potential to be a pivotal one for the communications history, and I invite you to share your ideas regarding statutory and agency modernization. Chairman Rockefeller, I know many members of the committee have already had an opportunity to meet privately with Mr. Wheeler, and I know others would like to do so. I also suspect there will not be enough time today to address all the questions our members may have, so the record will provide another opportunity for them to explore issues important to them and their constituents. Nevertheless, I appreciate your desire to process Mr. Wheeler's nomination in a timely manner in order to get the Commission back to its full membership as soon as possible, especially given the many critical proceedings before the agency. So I await the President's additional nomination to fill the seat previously held by Commissioner McDowell, and I'm ready to work with you and our colleagues to move forward both nominations in due course. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing Mr. Wheeler's testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your kindness in letting me go, although I don't think my presence on the floor will affect in a positive way the outcome of the vote on my amendment, but I appreciate your... Mr. Wheeler, on your blog, Mobile Musings, you indicated in 2011 that the FCC should have, or at a minimum that it could have, imposed conditions on the AT&T T-Mobile merger that could have later been expanded to the entire wireless industry. Your post could be read to say that the FCC should seek to do via merger conditions what it cannot do via its antiquated regulatory authority, and that is to, quote, backdoor to imposing a new regulatory regime on wireless, end quote, is how you characterized it, and I mentioned that in my opening statement. This concerns me because I believe that the FCC's transaction review authority should be used only to address competitive or public interest issues that are specific to the individual transaction. Rather than using strong-arm merger conditions to impose de facto regulations, shouldn't the FCC instead use its public and transparent rulemaking authority to implement industry-wide regulatory policy?
Thank you, Senator Thune. I appreciate you raising that issue, and I understand your concern. What you cited was hypothetical speculation. What a regulator must deal with are the realities of a specific case and the law and precedent that deals with merger review. There is scarcely anything more important that comes before the Commission than merger review. And that review must be conducted precisely based upon the facts in that specific instance, based upon the mandate that the Congress has established in the Act, and based upon precedent. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as chairman, those will be the guidelines that I will use in merger reviews.
Let me, and I want to quote from your blog post again. This is why my staff doesn't allow me to blog and limits my Twitter. But you assert that that merger conditions, and I want to quote again, established with the largest carrier could have been lifted into subsequent consent decrees for other carriers and even into the terms for subsequent spectrum auctions, end quote. Under the logic that, and I quote again, if AT&T can live with them, so can anyone else, end quote. But the question I have, to me, that would appear to be sort of exactly backwards. Isn't it large players like AT&T that can have more, or I should say that can more easily handle merger conditions, whereas small and medium-sized operations without huge teams of regulatory lawyers will be handicapped by regulations and intended for a much larger company?
I think this is one of the reasons that the kind of observation I made that you talk about specifics of that merger agreement that is being reviewed is important, because these are issues that have to be dealt with caution and with care and have broad impact, as you just suggested, sir. And the specific review of the specific issues in the case, guided by the statute and by precedent, is the role that the agency should play. You know I represent a rural state, as do a number of my colleagues here on both sides, and I'm firmly committed, as you know from our conversation, to expanding telecommunications opportunities for people in my state. I'm wondering, if confirmed as chairman, how you will approach the challenges that rural America faces with respect to telecommunications issues. So, Senator, it seems to me that we have made the jump from voice to broadband. Chairman Janikowski and the Commission, with the help of this committee, have made that jump. There is expansion of broadband going on, but there are three goals that I think are particularly important. One is the extension of broadband, as I just referenced. Second is the expansion of broadband as technology allows faster and faster speeds. And the third is the exploitation of broadband. And any one without the other is an incomplete solution. And so in rural America or in urban America, it's its expansion, its extension, expansion, and exploitation that are going to be the key to our broadband digital future.
Let me, if I might, just touch on the spectrum issue a little bit here. It's been over 5 years since the FCC held an auction to put new spectrum for mobile broadband into the marketplace. The question is, do you think that's an acceptable track record, and what do you intend to do to improve upon it?
Thank you, Senator. There are a couple of auctions teed up, not the least of which is the incentive auction, which will be the first time in the history of the world. I guess that's a little grandiose statement, but it will be the first time that an auction like this has been tried. This committee and the Congress have directed the FCC to do that in an expedited manner. Chairman Janikowski has set a schedule for that, and if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, it is my intention to move expeditiously to make spectrum available by auction in multiple bands.
Do you agree that the goal of the incentive auction ought to be to maximize net revenues in order to cover the costs of FirstNet, Next Generation 9/11, and to reduce the deficit?
Senator, the incentive auction, as I said, is something that's never been tried before, and I liken it to a Rubik's Cube. That over on this side of the cube, you've got to provide an incentive for broadcasters to want to auction their spectrum. On this side of the cube, you have got to provide a product that is structured in such a way that incentivizes the wireless carriers or whoever the bidders may be to want to bid for that spectrum. And then in the middle of this, on an almost real-time basis, you have to have a band plan that is constantly changing to reflect the variables that are going on here. That's why this has never been tried before. This is a monumental undertaking. And all of the pieces to create value for the broadcasters and value for the wireless industry and to pay for FirstNet and to provide something for the American taxpayer all have to go into this incredibly complex Rubik's Cube.
I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Chairman, my time's expired, and you've been more than generous in letting me go first, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.